The sound of shattering glass cut through the air like a scream. Desks overturned, paint smeared across the walls. A trail of broken crayons led to the center of the classroom, where Isabella Kane, just 9 years old, stood trembling on top of a chair, her small hands clenched around a silver locket. Her uniform was torn, her cheeks flushed. Around her, 20 children sat frozen, half in fear, half in awe. "Don't come any closer!" Isabella shouted, her voice cracked, too raw, too old for a child her size. "I said don't!" The teacher, pale and shaking, raised her hand slowly. "Isabella, sweetheart, please!" "I'm not your sweetheart!" the girl screamed, throwing a paintbrush that splattered red against the whiteboard. "You can't make me like you! I don't want another teacher!" The words echoed in the stunned silence. Then came the one that broke everyone's heart. "I want my mom!" The teacher's lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes welled up, torn between pity and panic. Behind her, the classroom door opened. Dr. Morgan, the school principal, appeared in the doorway with 2 assistants. She whispered, "It's over. Just let her go." The teacher's voice trembled. "She's only a child. And she's your 17th resignation in 4 months. We can't have another incident." The teacher looked back at the little girl, wild eyes, heaving chest, tiny fingers gripping the locket as if it were oxygen. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, and walked out. The door closed, and for a long moment there was nothing but the sound of Isabella's breathing, shallow, uneven, like someone fighting invisible waves. She slid down from the chair, knees hitting the floor, curling into herself, her voice barely a whisper now. "Everyone leaves," she said, staring at the locket. "Everyone always leaves." The hallway outside. Dr. Morgan sighs heavily, turning to her assistant. "That's 17, she mutters. "If we can't find someone who lasts, the board will push for her removal. The state's already watching." Down the hall, a man in an expensive suit appears, exhausted, disheveled, his tie loose. Alexander Kane. He runs a company that controls half the media empire in the country, yet right now he looks like a man who's lost everything that mattered. Dr. Morgan lowers her voice. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kane. We tried every specialist, every therapy, but your daughter—" "Don't call her a case file," Alexander cuts in, his tone sharp, defensive. "She's my child." The principal hesitates. "Then you'd better find someone who can handle her, sir, because soon even child services will step in." She walks away, leaving him standing alone in the hallway, surrounded by silence, holding nothing but the echo of his daughter's last words. "Everyone leaves." He closes his eyes, as if to praying to a God he stopped believing in the night his wife died. Fade out. Morning light spilled through the high glass windows of the headmaster's office, too bright, too clean for the kind of conversation that was about to happen. Dr. Morgan sat at the end of the long mahogany table, her posture precise, her hands folded like she was preparing for a trial rather than a meeting. Across from her sat Alexander Kane, his shoulders stiff, his jaw set in exhaustion. The man who once dominated boardrooms with iron confidence now looked hollow. 6 months had passed since the crash, the one that took Elena, his wife, and every morning since then had been a slow drowning. On the wall, a photograph of the school's graduating class gleamed. Perfect smiles, flawless uniforms, future leaders of the world. But in the middle of that perfection was a single missing frame, Isabella's. Dr. Morgan cleared her throat. "Mr. Kane, I know you respect what your foundation has done for this school, but after yesterday's incident, the board has reached its limit." He didn't respond. His eyes were locked on a small chip in the edge of the table, one imperfection in a sea of polish. The children were terrified, the staff is overwhelmed, and the media? Don't, Alexander interrupted, his voice low and warning. Don't mention the media. Dr. Morgan pressed her lips together. Then let me be direct. Isabella needs more than what we can offer. She needs containment, a structured environment. I've already made inquiries at Brookhaven Institute. He looked up sharply. You mean the facility that treats children like prisoners? She needs help, Mr. Kane, professional help. He rose from his chair, his hands trembling. You think I haven't tried? I've paid for every specialist money can buy, and not one of them saw her. Not really. Dr. Morgan's tone hardened. Maybe that's because she doesn't want to be seen. The words landed like a blade. Before he could answer, the door opened, and Lydia Shaw, the social worker assigned to Isabella's case, stepped in. A clipboard in hand, sharp eyes scanning every detail, the kind of woman who had seen too many families pretend to care only when the state got involved. Mr. Kane, she greeted, voice professional, detached. I understand there was another episode? He forced a thin smile. Is that what we're calling grief now? Episodes? She didn't flinch. I call it what the reports say. 17 resignations, 2 classroom evacuations, multiple incidents involving property damage, and now physical aggression. He stiffened. She threw paint, not punches. Dr. Morgan interjected softly. Still, this pattern can't continue. Lydia's gaze softened just a little, but her tone stayed even. Mr. Kane, I know you've been through a lot, losing your wife, raising a child alone, but you must understand that the state is obligated to act if a child's behavior becomes dangerous to herself or others. Alexander's throat tightened. You're threatening to take her away? I'm stating the law, Lydia replied calmly. If the reports keep coming, it may not be your choice. For a long, heavy moment, no one spoke. Then Alexander's voice broke through, quiet but full of steel. She's all I have left. If you take her, you'll finish what that car started. Lydia's pen hovered over the paper, but she didn't write that line down. Dr. Morgan cleared her throat again, forcing the conversation back into order. The board will expect a full report within the week. In the meantime, we'll need a replacement teacher, someone who can last longer than a week. Lydia nodded, closing her folder. Good luck finding one. As they left the office, Alexander remained alone, staring through the window at the manicured school gardens, the place his daughter used to love before she stopped laughing. Outside, the children played under the sunlight. Isabella sat by herself on a bench, tracing invisible shapes in the dirt with a stick, her eyes far away, somewhere only she could see. Alexander's chest tightened. He wanted to go to her, to say something, anything. But every time he tried, he saw his wife smile, and guilt would choke the words before they could leave his throat. So he turned away. And in another part of the city, inside a modest apartment with peeling paint and a second-hand desk, Clara Bennett stared at her laptop screen. An unusual job posting glowed before her eyes. Private educator wanted. For a high-profile family, experience with emotionally complex children preferred. High compensation, high discretion, high risk. She scrolled down and paused at the note in italics at the bottom. Previous applicants have resigned. Must be resilient. She leaned back in her chair, her breath unsteady. She had seen this kind of pain before, the kind no one wants to touch. And something deep inside her, that quiet place carved by her own childhood scars, whispered, "This is why you were meant to stay." The Kane estate rose from the edge of Westchester County like a fortress of glass and stone, majestic, cold, almost too perfect to feel alive. Morning mist clung to the manicured hedges, and for a moment, Clara wondered if even the air here obeyed some unspoken rule of control. Her cab pulled up to the circular driveway. A fountain shimmered at the center. White marble angels pouring water from empty urns. They looked beautiful and hollow. Clara stepped out, smoothing the crease of her navy coat. Her shoes clicked against the stone as she approached the heavy wooden doors. Before she could knock, they opened. Daniel Brooks, Alexander's longtime assistant, greeted her with a polite but guarded expression. The kind of man who had spent years protecting his employer's walls, both literal and emotional. "Miss Bennet?" "Yes." "Mr. Kane is expecting you. He's very particular about his time, so I suggest being direct." "I usually am," she said, with a faint, knowing smile. Inside, the mansion was a cathedral of silence. Grand staircases, glass corridors, polished floors that echoed with the absence of laughter. Every portrait, every sculpture seemed frozen mid-sigh, caught between pride and grief. Daniel led her into the library. The smell of oak and old books filled the room, sunlight spilling across shelves that reached the ceiling. And there he was, Alexander Kane, seated behind a mahogany desk, eyes fixed on a tablet glowing with unread emails. He didn't look up immediately. When he did, his gaze was sharp, assessing, the gaze of a man who no longer believed in luck or people. "Miss Bennet," he said, rising to shake his hand, "I appreciate your punctuality. Punctuality's easy. Patience is harder." That caught his attention. He gestured for her to sit. "I'll be blunt. You are not the first to apply for this position." "I have heard." 17 teachers in 4 months. Each one walked out. Some left in tears, others in anger. I've stopped asking why. I assume you've read the reports. "I have, but reports don't tell the truth. They tell the version that survives paper." He studied her, surprised by her calm tone. "You don't seem easily intimidated." "I learned early that fear isn't the enemy. Indifference is." He leaned back, folding his arms. "And what makes you think you can handle Isabella?" Clara met his eyes without flinching. "Because I don't plan to handle her. I plan to understand her." That silence, the kind that makes the air itself lean in, filled the room. "You've worked with traumatized children before?" he asked finally. "I've worked with children who stopped believing in safety. There's a difference." Alexander's gaze softened for the first time, just barely. He wasn't used to people talking to him like this. Not investors, not staff, not anyone. He tapped a folder on his desk. "Your resume is unconventional. So is your daughter's pain." That hit deeper than she intended, and she knew it, but she didn't apologize. For a moment, something flickered across his face, grief or guilt or both. He rubbed his forehead. "I'm not looking for a miracle, Miss Bennet. Just someone who won't quit after the first explosion." Clara tilted her head slightly. What if she's not exploding? What if she's signaling? Signaling what? That she's drowning. He didn't reply. From the hallway above, a faint sound echoed, a crash, followed by a small, strangled scream. Alexander closed his eyes. She's awake. Clara rose from her chair. "Let me go," she said. He looked at her, startled. "No, you shouldn't." but she was already walking toward the door, steady, unafraid. Daniel moved to stop her. "She's unpredictable." "So was I, once." She disappeared up the grand staircase, the soft echo of her footsteps fading into the sound of chaos above. Alexander stood frozen, torn between warning her and following her. Then, for reasons he couldn't explain, he let her go. Because deep down, he sensed something he hadn't felt in months, maybe years. Hope. The second floor of the Kane mansion felt like a museum of ghosts. The hallways were lined with portraits that refused to smile, doors closed too tightly, curtains drawn against the morning light. At the very end of the corridor, behind a white door scarred with faint scratches, came the muffled sound of breaking glass. Clara paused, her hand hovering above the doorknob. The air on this floor was heavier, thick with something that wasn't just anger. It was grief, fermented over time, turning into something volatile. Another crash, a sob that wasn't quite a sob, the sound of a child too proud to cry. Clara took a slow breath and opened the door. The room looked like the aftermath of a storm. Books scattered across the floor, paint splattered over the walls in streaks of crimson and blue. A mirror cracked down the middle like it had tried to hold in a scream. And in the middle of it all, Isabella Kane, barefoot on the bed, clutching a small silver locket in both hands, the same one she'd been holding in the classroom. When she saw Clara, her whole body tensed. Her voice was sharp, almost shaking. "Who are you supposed to be? Number 18? Clara didn't answer immediately. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her, careful not to let the latch click too loudly. "My name is Clara," she said softly. "I didn't ask for a new teacher." "I know." "Then go away." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I don't leave when people yell." That froze the girl for a heartbeat. It wasn't what she expected. Her fingers tightened around the locket. "You'll leave. They all do." Clara's gaze flicked around the room. The overturned lamp, the pile of shredded homework, a broken picture frame on the floor. Inside it, a photo of Isabella with her mother, both smiling, faces pressed together under sunlight. The glass had cracked right across the mother's face. Clara knelt slowly, picking up the frame with care, setting it upright on the nightstand. "You miss her," she said quietly. "Every second." Isabella's jaw trembled. "Don't talk about her." "Why not?" "Because it makes it worse." "No," Clara said, her voice gentle but steady. "Pretending she never existed makes it worse." Silence. The kind that hums just before something breaks open. Isabella's breathing quickened. "If you come closer, I'll throw it." Clara's eyes went to the locket. That was hers, wasn't it? She wore it every day. When she died, they said I should keep it. But I hate it, because when I hold it, I remember. And when I remember, it hurts. Clara took one careful step closer. "You know what happens if you throw it?" "It's gone." "Yes," Clara said. "And then all that will be left will be the pain." The girl's lip quivered. She wanted to fight back, but her strength was unraveling. Clara lowered herself slowly to the floor, sitting cross-legged, eye level with the child standing on the bed. No authority, no superiority, just presence. "When I was your age," Clara said softly, "I broke things too. People said I was angry. I wasn't. I was scared. I thought if I destroyed everything first, nothing could be taken from me." Isabella blinked, tears gathering but refusing to fall. Did it work? Clara smiled sadly. No, it just made me lonelier. The girl's voice shrank to a whisper. Everyone leaves. They always leave. Clara shook her head slowly. Not everyone. A tear slid down Isabella's cheek. Her small hands shook and the locket slipped, clinking softly against the floor. Both of them looked at it, motionless. Then, instead of picking it up, Clara pushed it gently toward her with the tip of her finger. You can keep it closed if it hurts too much to open, but don't throw it away. It's the part of her that waited for you to grow strong enough to look again. Isabella bent down, picked it up with trembling fingers, and clutched it to her chest. The storm in her eyes dimmed, not gone, but quieter. From the doorway, Alexander Kane had appeared, frozen in disbelief. He had seen every teacher yell, threaten, beg, but never this. Never silence becoming safety. Isabella looked up at Clara, her voice barely audible. You're not scared of me? Clara's answer was soft, unwavering. No, sweetheart, I'm scared for you. The child blinked. Something broke, not in destruction, but in release. She stepped down from the bed and for the first time in months let someone stand close enough to see her tears. Alexander's breath hitched. He took one slow step backward, retreating into the hallway, afraid that any sound might shatter the fragile peace blooming inside that room. Clara reached out her hand, not to touch, just to offer space. Isabella didn't take it, but she didn't turn away either. For now, that was enough. Fade out. The camera lingers on the locket, glinting between small fingers. A single ray of sunlight breaking through the window, touching both their faces. For the first time in months, the Kane mansion was quiet. Not the kind of silence born from fear, but the fragile stillness that comes after someone has finally been heard. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the dining room, soft and golden. Isabella sat at the long oak table, a glass of orange juice beside her untouched pancakes. The silver locket rested on the table, open now for the first time, revealing a small picture of her mother smiling. Across from her, Clara was telling a story, something simple, something that sounded like sunlight. A girl who built paper boats to carry her sadness down a river. Isabella listened without looking up. Her fingers traced the rim of the locket. Did the boat sink? She asked quietly. Clara smiled. Some did, but she kept building them anyway. From behind a newspaper, Alexander Kane watched the two of them, his heart caught somewhere between awe and guilt. For the first time since his wife's death, he saw his daughter eating, listening, existing without anger. He folded the paper, wanting to say thank you, but before the words could form, his phone buzzed. A sharp vibration, then another, then 5 more. Notifications filled the screen, messages, missed calls, alerts. A familiar dread crawled up his spine. He unlocked it. Across every news app, headline after headline screamed the same thing. The billionaire's daughter strikes again. Exclusive footage from inside the Kane mansion shows Isabella Kane attacking staff. Experts question father's fitness. Money can't buy control. Alexander's breath vanished. His hands trembled as he pressed play. A shaky, zoomed-in clip filled the screen. Isabella throwing paint, screaming, the moment frozen in humiliation. The footage had been taken weeks ago, but the angle, the editing, it was deliberate, manipulated, cruel. The audio had been amplified, the words twisted to sound violent. They'd cut out her cry for her mother. They'd cut out the pain. Now it looked like rage. Clara noticed the change in his face. What happened? Alexander couldn't speak. He turned the phone toward her. Her eyes darkened as she watched. Who leaked this? I don't know. It's everywhere. The school, the board, the media's tearing her apart. Isabella's fork fell onto her plate with a loud clatter. She stared at the screen, at her own distorted reflection in motion, her screams echoing through a stranger's commentary. That's me. That's me. They hate me. No, Clara said quickly, moving to her side. They don't know you, sweetheart. They're seeing a lie. But the little girl was shaking now, her voice breaking. Everyone's going to think I'm crazy. Daddy, they'll take me away, won't they? Alexander knelt beside her, panic rising in his throat. No one's taking you, Isabella. I won't let that happen. His words came out too fast, too desperate to sound believable. Clara could see it in his eyes, fear, not of losing his reputation, but of losing his child. The phone rang again, this time Daniel Brooks. Alexander answered. Daniel, tell me this isn't what it looks like. On the other end, Daniel's voice was tight. It's worse. Every outlet has picked it up. They're running the full clip tonight on CTV. The board is calling an emergency meeting, and Child Protective Services just sent a request for a home inspection. Alexander's chest constricted. They think I'm unfit. They don't just think it, Daniel said quietly. They're saying it. He hung up without a goodbye, his hands trembling as he set the phone down on the table. The air felt heavy, like the whole house had inhaled and forgotten how to breathe. Isabella's voice broke the silence. Daddy, am I a bad person? Alexander's throat closed. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Clara stepped forward. She knelt beside the girl, her voice low, fierce, steady. Listen to me. You are not bad. You are brave. Bravery doesn't mean smiling when it hurts. It means facing the world even when it lies about you. Tears streamed down Isabella's face. No one believes that. Clara reached out, wiping her tears gently. Then we'll make them believe it. Alexander looked at her, startled. How? Clara met his eyes. There was a fire in hers, calm, unwavering, defiant. We don't hide, we don't run. If they want to watch her fall, we show them how she rises. He stared at her like a man seeing a lighthouse through a storm, not believing, but needing to. That night, cameras flashed outside the mansion gates. Reporters shouted questions from the darkness. Mr. Kane, is your daughter violent? Is Child Services removing her? Did you pay off the school? Inside, Alexander stood by the window, watching the chaos unfold under the harsh glare of lights. Clara joined him quietly. They don't want the truth, he murmured. They want blood. Then let's give them something they don't know how to sell, she said softly. Redemption. Down the hall, Isabella sat curled up on her bed, clutching the silver locket. The moonlight brushed her face as she whispered into the quiet. She didn't run. She stayed. Her small voice carried down the corridor, fragile, yet unbreakable. And in that sound, something shifted. Outside, the world wanted a monster. Inside, a teacher had just begun a revolution. The conference room at the Department of Child Services was colder than a courtroom. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, sterile and unfeeling. Rows of officials sat behind polished desks, suits pressed, pens ready, eyes sharp with judgment. At the far end of the room, Dr. Evelyn Morgan adjusted her pearl necklace and cleared her throat. Her voice carried the smooth authority of someone who had learned to weaponize composure. Let the record show, she began, that the faculty of Jefferson Academy made every reasonable effort to accommodate the behavioral challenges of Isabella Kane. Despite 17 changes in staff and multiple incidents of aggression, the environment remained unsafe for the other students. She paused, just long enough for the weight of her words to land. And while I sympathize with the family's grief, I must emphasize that emotional volatility cannot excuse endangerment. Across the table, Clara Bennett sat beside Alexander Kane, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The air between them felt electric, not with fear, but with a truth ready to detonate. Dr. Morgan continued, turning slightly toward the social worker. "Miss Shaw, I trust you've reviewed the footage." Lydia Shaw nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "I have. And you agree the behavior is alarming?" Lydia hesitated. "I agree it's emotional." "Unstable, perhaps?" Dr. Morgan gressed. "Human," Lydia corrected. That single word caused a ripple through the room. Dr. Morgan stiffened. "Miss Shaw, I understand empathy is part of your job, but this is about safety. The child's emotional outbursts are symptoms," Clara interrupted quietly. Heads turned. Dr. Morgan's gaze snapped toward her like a whip. "Excuse me?" Clara met her eyes, calm, grounded, unapologetic. "They're not outbursts, they're signals." Dr. Morgan's tone sharpened. "You're not authorized to speak at this stage." Alexander started to rise, but Clara placed a gentle hand on his arm, a silent, "Let me." Then she stood. The room seemed to shrink around her. She was no longer the outsider, no longer the new teacher. She was a woman who'd seen too many children mislabeled as monsters when all they ever were was hurting. "You misunderstand grief for defiance, but I've seen the truth. She doesn't destroy things because she's wild. She destroys them because she's afraid no one will stay to pick up the pieces." The words hung in the air like music too honest to ignore. Dr. Morgan frowned. "That's very poetic, Miss Bennett, but we're discussing measurable behavior." "Then measure this," Clara replied. 17 teachers left, not because of her, because they couldn't stand the mirror she held up. They saw pain and called it disobedience because it made them uncomfortable. A murmur rippled through the board. Lydia's pen stopped moving. Clara continued, her tone low but trembling with conviction. "You all want her calm, not healed, just silent, because silence is easier to report on a chart. But healing is messy. It screams, it breaks things, it tests love to see if it's real." She looked directly at Dr. Morgan. "Tell me, doctor, when did education become damage control? When did we decide that a child's pain is less important than our reputation?" Dr. Morgan's face paled. "You're overstepping." "No," Clara said, stepping closer. "I'm refusing to step back." Alexander watched her, stunned. Every word she spoke carved something open in him, a part of himself that had been silent for too long. Dr. Morgan tried to recover her composure. "Mr. Kane, surely you understand that emotional instability poses a risk." Alexander's voice cut through the room, deep and shaking. "The only risk here is a system that calls my daughter broken because it's too blind to see she's grieving." The room fell still. Lydia slowly set her clipboard down, her voice softer now. "I'd like to hear from Isabella directly." Dr. Morgan's brows furrowed. "That's not protocol. Maybe protocol's the problem." Moments later, the door opened. A small, trembling figure entered, Isabella clutching her locket, eyes wide but determined. Clara knelt beside her. You don't have to say everything, just the truth." Isabella looked around the room, at the adults who had judged her, dissected her, written reports about her like she was a case file, not a child. Her voice was tiny, but it carried. "They think I'm bad because I scream, but I scream because it hurts." No one moved. She took a shaky breath. "When Mommy died, nobody talked about it. Everyone just told me to be good, so I tried. But the more I tried, the more it hurt. I thought if I broke things first, no one else could break me." The silence afterwards was unbearable, a silence filled with the sound of truth finally being spoken. Tears shimmered in Lydia's eyes. She looked at Dr. Morgan and said quietly, "I think we've heard enough." Dr. Morgan's mouth tightened, her authority slipping for the first time. "You can't possibly—" "I can," Lydia interrupted, "and I will." She turned toward Clara and Alexander. "I'll be filing a recommendation for continued custody under supervised follow-up, but not removal." Relief crashed through Alexander like a wave. He let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. Dr. Morgan stood frozen, defeated, her mask of control cracking for the first time. Clara knelt beside Isabella again, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You were brave." Isabella's eyes glistened. "Are they still going to watch us?" Clara smiled softly. "Let them. Sometimes the world needs to watch how love learns to stay." As the meeting adjourned, Alexander turned to Clara, his voice low. "You didn't just defend her. You changed everything." Clara's gaze drifted toward the door where Isabella had just left, her small figure framed by sunlight. "No," she whispered, "she did." Fade out. The sound of a closing file replaced by the quiet click of a child's locket opening again, for good this time. The hearing chamber of the State Family Council looked more like a theater than a place of justice. Rows of cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking like unblinking eyes. Journalists whispered into microphones, waiting for the moment the Kane scandal would finally collapse into ruin. Outside, a storm gathered, rain streaking across the tall glass windows in silver veins. Inside, every sound was magnified: the shuffle of papers, the low hum of whispers, the heartbeat of a father terrified of losing his child. At the center table sat Alexander Kane, his tie loosened, exhaustion carved deep into his face. Beside him, Clara Bennett, hands folded, calm but alert, a warrior cloaked in quiet. Across from them, Dr. Evelyn Morgan, the principal, immaculate as always, her polished smile concealing a storm of arrogance and fear. And in the corner, small, still, almost invisible, Isabella Kane, clutching her silver locket like a shield. The chairwoman of the council, a stern woman with ice-gray eyes, adjusted her glasses. "We are here today to determine whether the minor, Isabella Grace Kane, remains under the custody of her father. The state's concern, of course, is the safety of the child." Cameras clicked. Alexander's jaw clenched. Clara reached under the table, resting her hand near his, grounding him. Not touching, just steady. The chairwoman continued. "We will begin with testimony from Dr. Evelyn Morgan, principal of Jefferson Academy." Dr. Morgan rose gracefully, her heels clicking in perfect rhythm across the floor. She spoke with rehearsed sympathy. "It breaks my heart to stand here, but as an educator, I must put the welfare of all students above sentiment. Isabella's behavior has been increasingly erratic, violent outbursts, emotional manipulation, destruction of property. Our staff did everything we could, but there comes a point when compassion must give way to responsibility." Each word sliced through the air like paper cuts, small, cold, deliberate. Cameras zoomed in. The crowd murmured approval. When Dr. Morgan finished, she placed her hand over her heart as if she was the true victim of the tragedy she had helped create. The chairwoman nodded. "Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Ms. Shaw, your report." Lydia Shaw stood slowly. Unlike the others, she didn't have papers in her hands. She had only a look, the look of someone who had finally decided to stop playing along. "My report," she said, "has been amended." Dr. Morgan's head snapped toward her. "Amended?" "Yes," Lydia continued. "After visiting the Kane residence, I observed something that doesn't appear in the previous records. Safety. Real safety. Not control, not fear, but trust slowly rebuilding itself." A ripple of confusion moved through the room. "Miss Shaw," the chairwoman said cautiously, "are you suggesting a different conclusion than the one submitted by your department?" Lydia nodded. "Yes, because the child everyone describes in those reports is not the child I met." "Emotional bias," Dr. Morgan scoffed. "Empirical truth," Lydia interrupted. "I saw a girl who's been grieving, not rebelling, and I saw the woman who refused to give up on her." The chairwoman's eyes narrowed. "Are you referring to Ms. Bennett?" "Yes," Lydia said simply. "She stayed." The room erupted in whispers. Reporters typed furiously. The storm outside pressed harder against the glass. Clara remained silent. She didn't look triumphant. She looked full, like a heart carrying more than words could hold. She glanced at Isabella, who sat small and trembling beside her, head bowed. The chairwoman leaned forward. "Ms. Bennett, since your presence has become a matter of record, do you wish to make a statement?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. She rose, her voice low but clear. "Isabella doesn't need to be saved. She just needed someone who wouldn't run when things got hard. She didn't need perfection. She needed presence." She turned slightly toward the cameras. "You can call that defiance. I call it love." Before anyone could respond, a chair scraped quietly. Everyone turned. Isabella Kane had stood up. Her knees were shaking, but she stood anyway, the locket glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. Her small hand clutched it tight, as if her mother's voice was still trapped inside. A hush spread through the room. Even the storm seemed to pause. The chairwoman blinked. "Sweetheart, you don't have to." "I want to," Isabella said. Her voice trembled, but it was steady enough to fill the silence. "You said she shouldn't have stayed," she whispered, her eyes flicking toward Dr. Morgan. "But she did. Everyone leaves. She didn't." The room went completely still. Not a camera clicked. Not a breath moved. "I broke things. I screamed. I hurt people. But I never tried to be bad. I was just trying to see if anyone would stay after the mess. And she did." Clara's lips trembled, her hand covering her heart. Isabella lifted the locket, holding it out like a testimony. "This was my mom's. When she died, everyone told me to be strong. But no one told me that strong doesn't mean alone. Ms. Bennett did. She told me it's okay to cry, that crying doesn't mean I'm broken. It means I still have love left." She turned toward the council table, her voice rising, unsteady but fearless. "I don't need to be taken away. I don't need a new home. I just need the people who don't run." Her words hit like thunder. Even Dr. Morgan's practiced mask faltered. Tears gathered in Lydia's eyes as she whispered, "This child doesn't need separation. She needs safety. and she already found it. The chairwoman sat frozen for a long moment, the storm raging outside like applause from the heavens. Then she nodded slowly. The council will adjourn to finalize its review. She cracked her voice slightly. Mr. Kane, your daughter stays with you. Alexander exhaled like a man finally waking from a nightmare. He turned to Isabella, who was crying now, but smiling through it, and pulled her into his arms. Clara watched quietly, her eyes filled with something beyond relief. Not pride, not victory, something holier. Because in that room, under the glare of cameras, bureaucracy, and judgment, a little girl had done what no system could. She had told the truth, and the world for once had listened. As they left the chamber, reporters swarmed the hallway, shouting questions. Mr. Kane, how do you feel? Ms. Bennett, what will you do next? Isabella, what do you want to say to the people who called you unstable? The little girl paused, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. She looked straight into the cameras and said, softly but fiercely, "Maybe I was just sad. Maybe you should have asked why." And then she walked away, hand in hand with her father, her other hand still holding the locket, now glowing faintly under the corridor lights. Spring had come back to New York. The city, once blurred by storms and headlines, now shimmered in gentle sunlight. Cherry blossoms lined the sidewalks. Their pale pink petals floated like small promises that the world could start over. At the edge of Westchester County, the Kane mansion no longer felt like a fortress. Windows that had once been shuttered now stood open. Curtains moved softly in the breeze. Where silence used to live, laughter now wandered freely, a fragile, beautiful noise rediscovering its home. In the kitchen, Alexander Kane was trying and failing to flip pancakes. A streak of flour dusted his hair. He laughed, a sound that had almost gone extinct in that house. Across the counter, Isabella sat on a stool, legs swinging, eyes bright. "Dad, that's not how Mom used to do it," she teased. He grinned, mock defensively. "I'm improvising." "You're ruining breakfast." "I'm reinventing it." She giggled, that rare, shimmering sound that once seemed impossible. Clara Bennett leaned against the doorway, watching them. Sunlight kissed the side of her face. Her expression carried the soft ache of someone witnessing healing and knowing when to step back. Isabella noticed her and waved. "Miss Bennett, he burned another one." Clara laughed. "Then I'd call that progress. At least he's cooking." Alexander turned, a smear of batter on his wrist. "You didn't just teach her, Clara," he said quietly. "You reminded me how to stay." Clara's eyes glistened. Sometimes, staying is the bravest thing you can do. Later that afternoon, the three of them walked through the garden. The air was sweet with lilacs. Sunlight dripped through the branches. Isabella ran ahead, chasing butterflies, her locket bouncing against her chest. The silver gleam caught the light, no longer heavy with grief, but glowing with memory. Alexander and Clara followed slowly. "She's different," he said softly. "She's free," Clara answered. "Pain doesn't vanish, Alexander. It transforms. It becomes roots." He looked at her, not with longing, but with recognition. Two souls who had carried storms and learned to let them rain without drowning. "When this started, I thought saving her meant fixing her." Clara smiled faintly. "Love was never about fixing. It's about staying when everything's still broken." A breeze rustled the trees. For a moment, Alexander closed his eyes, and he could almost hear Elena's laughter riding the wind, not haunting, but blessing. That evening, as twilight settled, Isabella sat at her desk by the window, drawing in her sketchbook, a picture of her family, her mother, her father, and beside them, a woman with kind eyes and ink-stained hands. Underneath, she wrote, in uneven letters, "She didn't run, she stayed." Clara passed by the doorway and paused, watching. Her eyes softened, but she didn't interrupt. Some moments are too sacred to touch. Downstairs, the radio hummed softly. The house glowed with the quiet rhythm of ordinary life. Plates clinking, laughter rising, a door closing gently instead of slamming. Outside, the moon rose over the garden where once there had been shouting and shattered glass. Now the same windows reflected warmth, the proof that love, once chosen, can rewire the world. In the final frame, Isabella looked up from her drawing and whispered almost to herself, "She didn't run, she stayed." Fade out. The camera lingers on the open locket, resting on her desk, the photograph inside whole again, the light of a candle flickering in its reflection. Then silence. Not emptiness, peace.